The notion of apparition is something I've been very interested in for a while now, and I've made work and paintings around that. And now I'm actually focusing on the process and how it actually works. And for me, it's a transitory space where things can point in certain directions and create possibilities in our minds, and we accept to engage with them or not. And I think the installation is a good example for that. And some of the paintings also, I mean, the paintings in general also, where there's a lot of possibilities and ways of seeing what is happening, either on the surface or actually in the room. So this is something that I'm interested in because that process is at the core for me of what happens or what is happening before and the birth of a work, for example, or a moment. And there these objects become residues of our thoughts or my thoughts, to be more precise. Having this kind of these columns separating the space, I thought about borders, and especially in the time that we're in right now. There's a lot of reasons to think about that and also to redefine what that is, especially with the refugee crisis and the movement of people, how constrained we can be today, or if not, in danger when we're actually moving around. And also the value of lives based on actually where you're from and your passport, all these things I'm very sensitive to. So I think this piece has many layers. There's a physical aspect of it where you can't really cross the room. There's something in the way. But there's an emotional and spiritual aspect where you actually can project yourself and what this border can actually mean to you. And because of how the fabrics is treated, is also you're wondering what happened in these borders, what was left in the objects on the floor that are references for me to nature or to kind of sometimes intestines or fecal matters and things like that. It's also a way for me to address this kind of imaginary landscape that you might have brought with you or left behind in the process of moving around. So these are things that I'm trying to compose with, and I think art is a good space to kind of try to embrace the nuances and the complexities that comes with concepts like borders and our humanity in the process. The title evolved. I mean, the meaning of the title evolved for me, the end of Figuration. It started with this kind of ambiguity that I had and this kind of like concern that I have, that the facility that we had to kind of create this false dichotomy between figuration and abstraction, as if they were opposed or they were just hand in hand, or it was either abstraction or figuration. And for me, figuration is a way of is inside of abstraction. We're projecting something and we're trying to replicate it or have something similar to it, either on the surface of a painting or of a visual experience. It's part of a language of abstraction, the same way as symbolism and repetition and all these things are part of a umbrella for me. From what I understood from Figuration, it's also a place where people's imagination commute. The artwork is like projecting an object, or a concept. It could be a chair, it could be a flower, and we agree that this is a flower. It's harder and harder for our imagination to commute and to agree that this is what reality is. And there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of tension in what we're agreeing on, and either it's politically or even artistically, the nuances about apparition and about how things are defined. It's a rich space for art to execute its beauty, And I wanted to live in that space, to create a space where we're going to start over. We're going to question what figuration is, what figuration can be, and started engaging with our imagination from a different angle. Being an artist is, for me, a way of being present, in the world, and creating through my experience as a human being residues of my thoughts and what I've experienced as a person, whether it's personal or politically or historically, And I think by doing so, I'm preserving something, we are preserving something that is very precious to us. And these objects that we're doing, these residues, they're reflected to people in a way that, reminds them of certain things, either that they experienced or that is hidden inside of them, is very important to me. From the perspective of a young black man, I think the process of making art and creating spiritual value for me is a way to preserve my humanity, to put it forward and to create and to underline the complexities that comes with it, whether it's politically, whether it's emotionally. To this day, certain people will argue that my life is lesser or that I'm not completely a human being, So to be able to show my work and talk about it and, share it with people and present this kind of layers of perspectives about life, about emotions, about history, about the structure of power that are kind of defining us every day. And strangely enough, today reducing us more and more. I think what we're doing, artists, become more and more important. That's when we get to work. When I think about anatomy is when I started working around that piece, I discovered some body parts in the process, which is very rare to me because I don't necessarily work thinking about body parts, But then when I saw that, I turned it into a kind of like archive of what the body could be, and the movement that could happen inside and outside of the body. And I started to symbolically represent certain things, whether it's fingers, whether it's vertebra, and things like that. Travel, basically, inside of the body and put a figure on a pedestal to a certain point. And I think the connection with this process of respectfully and sometimes non-respectfully enter the body and kind of present and stretch it on the surface, create an elasticity, not just on the body, but on our perspective of it. It's something that I also brought into Unmade, which happened like that, which happened through on the surface where certain parts started revealing themselves. And, in the process of painting, I have to take decisions and start preserving and kind of like erasing and putting precisions in terms of composition of where I want people to go visually. So I think Unmade also works like that with the same process than anatomy. It's more obvious in anatomy, I think, but in Unmade, it's really the process of something fleeting away, and I think that's very precious because we're kind of doing that just by breathing. We're kind of fading away one breath at a time, which I think is very poetic. It can be dramatic for some, but I think it's very poetic because it's through your breath that you can say things like, I love you, and it just resonates, it's vibration to a certain point. And I want to wrap up with The Brain, which is a piece that I love a lot because we're talking about how abstraction function. And I think to do an abstract piece and to use the title as an entry point to tell you that this is actually the brain, it kind of puts you in a space where you're trying to understand how symbolically this represents the brain, And I think these are the different elements within the banner of abstraction that we can access certain work, that we can let our imagination triggered, and try to solve it with like a riddle, you know what I mean? And I think it's very important to have this kind of sense of play in the process. The idea of bringing spirituality in art is something that is old like the world. I think spirituality is art. We're trying to preserve something, nurture something, and connect with something that is bigger than us and that connects us all together. The idea is to be sensitive to that. I don't think there's like a way of approaching it, And I think, to be more precise, I grew up in Haiti, and every place, there's a reason why we're born where we're born. And the land where we're born carries spiritual legacies. I like to say I don't serve the spirits, but I know, for example, that voodoo knows me. I'm part of that lineage and that legacy.